spinning back to the open side. Korombete, lovely ball here for Samu, who's quick. Pete Samu looking for Korombete, back to Samu. Oh, that is wonderful. That is wild. That is amazing from the Wallabies.
Hi there and welcome to Pick and Drive Rugby. We are the People's Podcast, providing a platform for rugby lovers to come together and support the game that's played in heaven. I'm your host, Mitch. Join me this week is co-host Lachie. Lachie, how are you, mate?
Very good, Mitch. Good to be with you, but I've got to be honest, I'm still in a bit of shock and a bit of mourning after the massacre that we saw over the weekend. I'm sure we'll unpack it in a bit, but how about you, mate? How are you going?
Yeah, a busy week away from rugby, so I'm much looking forward to getting into this podcast and just chatting some rugby and dissecting the Wallabies' performance against Fiji over the weekend. Not the result that we were hoping for, but if those of our fans listening online did catch our new segment, which we called the wrap-up, which Lachie and I posted out last Thursday, I called a draw. So when we were coming into that, I was thinking, I don't know if I can get on here and say that I think Fiji is going to win this. So I went with the draw, but I honestly wasn't that surprised that Fiji did win. But I'll save that for when we get to the game. Yeah, I guess there's a lot of rugby content to get through. We will get through week 2 of Rugby World Cup 2023. Ando's not here this week. He's off marking assignments and being a general teacher and doing all those interesting teacherish things. Not sure how much rugby he got to watch over the weekend. Maybe that's why he's just not showing up this week, or he's just so upset with the Wallabies that he can't face chatting through it this week. But Lachie, you and I, we can do that on Ando's behalf.
Yeah, we'll stick up for him. It's been a bit of a tough one, and if he's in mourning, he's in mourning.
Well, if you are listening to the podcast and you want to get involved in some way and be a little bit more practical and hands-on with the Rugby World Cup, we do have a tipping comp. So we are running this tipping comp on the Rugby World Cup 2023 official page. Now, if you haven't signed up, it is not too late. You can still sign up. I don't know if you will get close to some of these guys up the top of the competition, but our code is GN36. I can't read the rest of that. Anyway, go to our socials. It's all on there. But it's pretty small on my screen, the little code there. It's just a jumble of numbers. But for those that are in the competition, well done to our top 3 currently. Felix 9 is in first place on 166 points. XBunLS67X, whoever you are out there, is on 154 in second place. And we've got Bone XV in third place on 146. Now, we have over 100 people in this competition. Lachie, where are you currently sitting on the ladder?
I would have wished you made it a top 10. I'm getting close. I'm really getting close to that tipping one. In fact, I think if I have a quick look through, I am. I'm 10th. I'm 10th on 117. So Felix 9, I'm coming for you. But also, if you want to send me your tips to compare, I won't be too upset about that one. And we've also got fantasy running at the moment, Mitch. There's still time to get involved with that, yeah?
Yeah, no, that's really exciting new format, which we haven't done for Super Rugby or any of the other sort of international competitions over the past few years. So we are running this for the Rugby World Cup, and Rugby World Cup website has a really great platform for that. There's a snazzy little app. You get to pick your team based on who you think is going to do well each week, and then you gather points, and whoever's doing the best gets the best score. Now, Lachie, you're pretty excited about this because you're up the top of the table in that one, aren't you?
No, I'm getting there. There's still, just going through the top 10, we've got a few familiar faces in there from what I can see. We've got a Solza on top on 1,405 points, so well clear of second place, killing it. I'm back on 11th on 1,155, but there's been some, I got to admit, I've used some Cumberland boosters already. So I'm probably going to run pretty flat in these last few weeks of the competition, but a fast start, and if I burn out, I'll burn bright. So we'll just have to kick on and see how we go.
Well, yeah, I don't even know if I'm in the top 100 for that one. My team has not been doing as well as I was anticipating, but nonetheless, it is a good, fun little bit of, I guess in some ways it's almost like trivia, trying to guess who's going to be the best depending on who they're going up against and using your boosters wisely. But it is a fun little competition that I would encourage everyone to get involved with. So do go to our socials and you'll find the link to join both of those. Now, what are we going to cover tonight? Like last week, we are in the middle of Rugby World Cup 2023. So this is week 2. So we will start off with the Wallabies' somewhat disappointing performance against Fiji in Pool C. We'll then run through the rest of the pools and touch briefly on some of the results. Overall, probably not as exciting a week of competition as last week shaped up to be week 1, or week 3 is going to be next week. We might not do a great deal of preview. We might save that for Thursday for our wrap up. But yeah, we'll definitely dive into the Wallabies' performance, sort of analyze what went wrong and what we sort of thought coming out of that game. And then we will talk a little bit around future World Cups and what the World Cup, some news that's come out in the past sort of week or so around what's happening 2027 and beyond. And then the Wallaroos have also announced their 30-person squad for the upcoming Laura O'Reilly Cup and World 15 or World XV, which we'll dive through as well. So I think that's a lot of rugby content to get through tonight. Let's leave it there and let's just dive into the Wallabies game. All right, I think we've put it off long enough. Let's rip the Band-Aid off. Let's get into Wallabies and Fiji. Week 2 of Rugby World Cup 2023. Final score, Fiji 22, Australia 15. Now, leading into this, we did put our predictions in. I went for the draw. How did you think this one was going to go, Lachie?
I messed up. I'll be honest. About a week ago on our preview pod, I confidently flagged a 20-point win was on the horizon because Fiji wouldn't be able to sustain the disappointment and the energy required after that Wales game. And I was so wrong. I've got so much apologising to do to so many people. And I've already been hammered by a fair chunk of the Kiwis that follow scrum bags. So you just worry about your own patch, boys, and I hope the Italians do a job on you. But yeah, I'm going to eat humble pie. We were out enthused, outthought, outplayed, and we were lucky to get a bonus point, honestly. So you were pretty close with your draw prediction.
Yeah, I was on track for a little while. I was thinking that this was in the last maybe 5 or so minutes. I was like, this is actually looking pretty good for my draw. Probably a draw maybe would have been the best result for the Wallabies in terms of the permutations of the pool moving further in and how the I guess the rest of the pool stages goes for Australia and Pool C particularly. But we need to start off by saying, well done to Fiji. Take our hats off completely. Eat humble pie. As optimistic as we were as Wallabies fans, this Fijian team and this Fijian performance was fantastic. This has to be the best performance we have seen by Fiji, I'm going to say to date. Their game against England earlier this year was good and was a pretty big moment for them to get their first victory ever over England, particularly in London. But I think this game, Fiji dominated from the outset and put Australia under a heap of pressure. And Australia really, or the Wallabies, didn't have many answers to what Fiji were dishing up.
You bang on. And what Fiji brought out was exquisite test match footy. I mean, we know that they've won 7s World Cups, 7s gold medals at the Olympics, but this is, without a doubt, the biggest moment in their 15s history. It's been mentioned, I think there was an interview with 7s legend Waisale Serevi, who said it's the biggest moment for 15s. Their post-game, their lock, Timu Mayana Vanua, I think, he said it's the biggest moment in Fiji sport and Fiji as a whole. Like, this is the impact that it's having. And if we take off our gold glasses and wipe away our tears, we can see that this has been in the pipeline for a number of years now, ever since the Drua first came into the NRC and won a comp after a couple of years, since they've been in Super Rugby and they've played finals already, regardless what you make of the system, and they've won big games against New Zealand teams. And this is just the flow-on effect from having a consistent, cohesive, top-tier unit. And I'm so happy. I'm so happy for Fiji to see it happen. I just wish it was against Wales and not us at a World Cup. But there you go. We've got to grin and bear it. And a lot of credit has got to go to sort of Australian sport working with Pacific Sport to make it happen. It's really exciting to see the benefits of this come out. But we got beaten to the post in every single way. I mean, we lost the ruck battle. We lost the scrum battle. That was a match-winning tight head at the end of the game from Fiji. And we lost the kicking duel. We lost the strategic and place kicking duel to Fiji. And it's a credit to Fiji, but it's an indictment on how we ended up playing in that game. But yeah, I mean, 4 penalties in that first half, that's clinical test footy. How good's that from Fiji to see them be able to start putting away a side and apply scoreboard pressure?
It's something coming into this game, we've seen how the Indrua have performed in Super Rugby Pacific this year. We've seen how the Sevens players have played on the world circuit. The Fijian style of rugby is very much up-tempo, keep the ball moving, offload, central, just don't die with the ball, essentially. Just keep it moving, keep it flowing through the hands. This is actually not the game that is not the style that Fiji played this week against Australia. They played a very smart rugby, the very tactically driven game. They intently attacked Australia's breakdown. They were I don't know if we say duly rewarded in that regard. We'll probably get to some of the refereeing decisions a little bit later. But they put Australia under a lot of pressure. They were very clinical in the way that they kicked the ball, that they held possession in certain areas of the field. Their set piece was fantastic. Their line-out struggled at times. That was probably the only area where the Wallabies actually seemed a little bit dominant. But in saying that, the Wallabies flipping the coin over to them, what was the game plan? I was watching the mini just before we came into this game, into recording tonight, just to sort of have it fresh in my mind. And the thing that jumps out to me was there was no clear game plan. To me, as a pundit sitting at home watching from Australia, it felt like the idea for the Wallabies was, let's give it to our biggest blokes and see if we can just break the line. Fijians aren't great at tackling, so let's just try and push through them. I mean, it's barbaric. It's just ridiculous in that we were having so consistently so many just one-up runners, no pod systems, nothing, getting smashed back against the game line, making negative meters at time and time again, and yet not ever looking to do something else, not putting the ball through the hands, not having set back plays or effectively kicking out of territory. We just didn't seem to know what we were doing, and there was no one that was sort of directing the Wallabies around the field.
You bang on again. And I think that lack of direction and that lack of creativity in attack was exposed brutally, because even, if you apply that game plan with the outs that we had, so you put Will Skelton, you put Taniela Tupou, you bring in Alan Alatoa in, these big, heavy ball runners, Pone Falmasili, I mean, you're still sending them one out. So imagine doing that with a team that's half the size of the pack you think you've got, and sending it to the Levani Batias of the world, who are just monstering you time and time again. It was lambs to the slaughter. And then in the back line, I mean, Carter Gordon, sorry, didn't have his best game. I think we can be pretty honest and upfront about that. And the kicking out of hand was dreadful. I mean, a couple of occasions where we've got the ball with, some space and some room to move, and we're kicking it away and we're kicking it dead. Jordan Pataya, Sliasi Vunivalu, Mark Nwanganituasa, they all had kick errors throughout the game.
Nick White as well. Yeah,
Nick White, absolutely. That box kick made me scream.
Nothing was on. Why would you kick it?
Just outside the 22. And even if it goes out, yes, the lineout's working, but keep the ball in hand.
But it's not a 50-22 when we've kicked it.
No, it wasn't a 50-22. It was so many infuriating parts of that game. I'm trying to look at some positives. You mentioned the lineout, which worked well. I thought Nick Frost had a really good game defensively in the lineout, showed us what we're missing with having a heavy two like Will Skelton, who isn't a dominant jumper. So that's a positive. Rob Valentini, I thought, still played really well. He got sort of sent up against that, Fijian wall a few times, but he still topped our carry meters, our carries with ball in hand, our tackles. He never gave up. outside of that, I'm finding it really hard to see positives from this game, and all the positives to mind came from some of the Fijian performers. Simeone Kuruvoli was unbelievable at halfback. They actually lost a lot with Lamani coming on towards the end, I thought, both out of hand and off the tee. Jusua Tuisova, who's already known as a beast, had the game of his Fijian career, playing at 12. I think moving Radradra out to the wing and putting him in was a masterstroke. And Levani Botia, who we mentioned before, was terrifying as a 7, and really, I think, outshone Fraser McReight. He got a bit exposed, both physically, either side of the ruck. So, where do we go from here? Do we have any positives to look at?
Let's focus on the lead up to this game for the Wallabies.
Yep.
So, the squad's announced on Thursday night, Friday morning Australia time. At that time, Taniela Tupou is not named in the team, and he's been confirmed as out with a calf injury, or a hamstring strain, sorry. There's question marks that day at training that come up when the squad's preparing to play Fiji, and Will Skelton has been named at captain, but he's not training, and he's not seen at training, and he's not with the team. The media asks multiple times throughout Friday, throughout Saturday, in the lead up, Sunday as well, this Australia time, in the lead up to the test, is Will Skelton playing or not? And the answer is, we're not sure. We're giving him as much time as we can to get fit and to play the game. It's announced pretty much an hour before kickoff that no, he's not fit. He arrives at the stadium in a moon boot, and that causes a shift with Arnold coming into the starting side and Phillip coming in onto the bench. Now, whether you agree with the tactics and the communication that Rugby Australia or Eddie Jones or whoever is responsible for this has gone with here, you would imagine that the Wallabies knew that Skelton most likely wasn't going to be playing in their preparation leading up to this game. So you can't necessarily say that the effect of Skelton not being able to line up on Sunday morning or Monday morning, Sunday afternoon in France was a determining factor in the Wallabies not being able to perform. It wasn't a last-minute scratching like we saw Sam Cane in the opening World Cup game for France against France. But it's still it's confusing and it's frustrating that there's not a clear communication from Rugby Australia around what is happening, who's playing, who's not, what's the lineup going to be. And then coming into the game, we have lost two of our most influential players in terms of game impact, Taniela Tupou and Will Skelton. And yet we don't seem to adjust the style of play to cater for the outs or the ins, the players coming in to replace those. Now, James Slipper is a fantastic player and probably one of the Wallabies' best over the years, but he's not Taniela Tupou. He's not going to have the same game-breaking impact that Taniela Tupou has. Arnold, conversely, is a good option at 4 or 5. I think he was in for the 5 jersey, but he's not Will Skelton. And he's not going to have as dominant carries and game-busting lines that Will Skelton plays. Yet we're still playing that style of game plan with those players not in the team. It's just kind of frustrating that it didn't seem like, or it seems like Eddie Jones had this style of play in mind leading into this game, and that he somewhat didn't expect Fiji to play a smart, counter-intuitive or counterproductive style against us. Like it almost seemed like he was expecting Fiji to play sevens rugby for the majority of this game. And when they didn't, he didn't have an answer, or he didn't have any way to shift the game plan.
Yeah, and he's fessed up, in fairness. He's come out in the post-match and said, the loss is on me, it's my responsibility, throw the baguettes and the croissants or whatever he, tossed out at the press conference. But it speaks to a wider concern about, do the Wallabies have the capacity to change their structure and their game plan when put under pressure or when put under strain? So at the moment, I don't think we've seen them successfully adjust during a game. I would argue that up until this game throughout the year, we've seen progress. I think we can safely say that the change in the side that played in Pretoria to the side that played in Dunedin and then even elements of the Georgia game, there were improvements and steps along the way. There was more coherence. We had better set piece. Our attacking ruck was improving. And then against Georgia, our discipline was really good. But you flip the switch, we conceded 18 penalties. 18 penalties in a crucial World Cup game that Eddie Jones marked as our most important, and we give away 18 penalties, many of which were with us ball in hand. So we've wasted opportunities. I think there were four occasions in the final 10 minutes where we've been pinged on our attacking breakdown, which is criminal. So that's an inability to clear the first man at the ball, or so it's either a technical issue or that's a speed and effort to get to the ruck in the first place. And that in a World Cup pool game is really tough for fans to see, because no one's doubting that our Wallabies have heart and we back them all the way. We want to see them do well, but it's really hard to watch that unfold in front of us. And I have hope and I have belief that we can go out and do a job against Wales, because I truly don't fear Wales the way that I feared this Fijian game. But we've just been left with a mountain to climb now.
So there's two points that I want to focus on, and both of them really sit under the umbrella of what was Eddie Jones thinking and what was his game plan. Yeah. So the first point of confusion and contention for me was his handling of Carter Gordon. Now, coming into this tournament, we all know he only picked one fly half in his 30-man squad or 32-man squad, whatever it is for a World Cup. No backup. It's become evident that Ben Donaldson is that backup, but he's playing 15. So when asked in the lead up to the World Cup, well, why have we not got Quade Cooper? Why have we not got Bernard Foley? Where's Noah Alessio, for example? Eddie Jones said, no, I trust Carter Gordon. He's the future. He's the guy that I've chosen to lead this team at fly half, and he's our guy. Yet in this game, and we've said it before, Carter didn't have a great game, and that's fine. It's kind of to be expected that a player of his age and his experience isn't going to be able to fire against the top teams in the world, particularly under the pressure that he was put under by Fiji. And all credit to them, they definitely put him under a lot of pressure, and they kind of dampened his impact on the game. So he hooks him at the 50th minute. Now that causes this massive shifting and jumbling of the back line. Ben Donaldson shifts from 15 into fly half. Nwangani Tuasi goes from the wing into fullback, which he's played barely a few minutes for the Waratahs in that position this year, in a similar sort of circumstance when there was injuries and it was just something that had to happen. And then Vunivalu comes in off the bench. Now, if Carter Gordon is your choice, is your man, is your fly half, your sole fly half in the squad, why would you pull him off in the 50th minute? What's Eddie Jones's plan moving forward now that it sends a clear message to Carter Gordon that, no, you weren't good enough, and I don't have faith in you seeing out a game that is as crucial as this one was? It's mind-boggling.
It's tough to see, and it's always been under the spotlight with Australian 10s as well, this sort of missing generation that's spoken about. And we saw Dave Rennie do the same thing as recently as the Welsh Test last year. You know, Ben Donaldson's put on for the first half in just his second outing after missing the kick to beat Italy. And he has a pretty average first half. And then it's, of all people, Noah Alessio, who comes on and actually steers that Wallabies win. So it's not the first time we've seen a 10, be backed and this is the changing of the guard and then hooked. I think in stand coverage, Sonny Bill Williams actually had quite an insightful moment saying, he'd actually, I don't know what they're doing with Carter Gordon. I want to see him give another shot, because for a young fella's confidence being pulled like that would be a tragedy. And it kind of is. Like, I really feel for Carter Gordon with all the pressure that's been placed upon him. And especially as a young bloke, like, this isn't a seasoned Richie Mo'unga or a Andre Pollard or a Jalibert who has been there and done that in a World Cup. This is a young bloke who would only have a handful of wins to the Rebels to his pro credit. This isn't exactly a successful winning environment that's been fostered from a young age. So yeah, it's tough to see. I'm not sure whether I would have done the same. But, how far does emotion go? If Eddie really thinks that Carter wasn't the man to do it and Donaldson is, then why wasn't that the case from the get-go? Like it's a tough position that Eddie is.
But he's put himself in such a difficult situation by choosing Vunivalu on the bench. Vunivalu is an out-and-out wing. He can't play centre. He can't play fullback. Andrew Kellaway has been one of the Wallabies' best in the past few years, and yet he hasn't had a minute at this World Cup. He's had barely a minute under Eddie Jones since Eddie Jones came back. Now, putting him on the bench, which we probably will see in the Wales game next week, and we'll talk a little bit about that in later in the week. He is such a versatile player. He can play fullback, he can play wing, he can play centre. He probably could, at a very, very bad situation, play fly half if needed and be okay at it. But he's just not getting minutes. Now, the second point that I wanted to touch on is one of the comments that Eddie Jones made in the press conference after the game when asked kind of around selections and what his sort of philosophy was and why he pulled Carter Gordon. And one of the stats that he brought up as the coach was, well, we have to realize that this Wallabies team, the bench particularly, has the least amount of caps since like 1996 or something. Like, I can't remember the exact year it was. And I just sat there thinking, don't use that as an excuse. You name this squad. You can't come in and start using this inexperience. These guys don't have the experience. They don't have the caps. They're not, almost saying they're not ready for this level yet as an excuse of why we didn't win the game. When we have guys at home who have played Australian rugby, Australian Super Rugby for the last 4 years, who you didn't select. Michael Hooper, Brad Wilkin, Ryan Lonergan. Like, some of these guys, Carter Gordon, Bernard Foley, Quade Cooper, those guys at fly half, whether they're included or not, that's a bit here or there at the moment, considering where they're at in their age and whatnot. But don't start using the inexperience as an excuse. We have guys at home that didn't get picked. Michael Hooper is a key example of a player who would have had a much bigger impact on this game if he was selected. Now, Fraser McWright wasn't bad this week, and he hasn't been bad this tournament, but he also hasn't been outstanding. I haven't seen him do a great deal. Whether it is the game plan that we're bringing into this World Cup, I have not seen our presence on the ball in the last 2 weeks. Now, it was something we mentioned earlier around Fiji's dominance at the breakdown, and they were getting counterattack. They were getting rewarded with their jackals and getting turnover ball quickly from our attack. We weren't dominating their breakdown like they were ours. We needed someone like Michael Hooper, who is an on-ball presence, to kind of realize and has the experience to sort of say, okay, guys, this is what's happening. This referee is just blowing penalties for anyone who gets a fingernail on the ball at the moment. We need to go hard at the breakdown. And we didn't have that change of tactic this week.
Yeah, you're right. We didn't adjust at all. And then you think about sort of the roles of jackalers and who they are now in a team. And you see like the Dontees of the world who are a 12 that can jackal, or even the hooking role, which has now become almost like another jackler as well. We didn't see those players in those positions step up. I saw Ben Donaldson get a good turnover, and like, you need to be versatile and be able to do it everywhere. But yeah, not having a set jackler has been tough to see, especially when that's a point of pride for, I think, Australian teams going through. We've got a storied list of open sides, and it's certainly not a knock on McWright, who's a really good on baller at Super Rugby level. But yeah, he's been pretty well contained these first 2 games. It will be a great challenge for him against Wales, against Jack Morgan, which I'm keen to unpack in the previews. But yeah, there's an interesting week coming up, and I kind of shudder to think of what our pods might be next week if we're coming in off a result against Wales that I don't even want to verbalise at this point.
Yeah, look, it's this is the frustrating thing is, and for both of us, look, you work for Rugby Australia, so you can say you know, in some ways your hands are tied a little bit. You've got to keep your job and keep your bosses happy, which is fine. But the frustration for me as a Wallabies fan, and for the thousands of people that have travelled to France to support the Wallabies. I heard a number today that there's 50,000 Australian rugby fans who are supposed to have bought tickets and are travelling to the tournament over the course of the whole tournament to support the Wallabies, and I guess just to support rugby, because Who knows how far we will go at the moment. But the way that the Wallabies performed this week and the way that they performed last week, it's not instilling any kind of faith or reward in being a fan and putting your hard-earned money on the line to go and support these guys. Now, we've had the World Cup is the pinnacle of our sport. And for Eddie Jones to come into it and to, first of all, name the team that he named moving in, leaving the big names and the players who have been so important for the Wallabies in the past few years, Michael Hooper and Quade Cooper and those big names at home, to not even feature in this squad. And then to come in and to have the bravado in the media to sort of talk about this smash and grab, that we're coming in and I'm confident we're going to win the World Cup. You know, we're going to smash everyone in our pool and we're going to catch everyone off guard. We're going to play this really different style of rugby that no one's seen before. We're playing Eddie ball, all these kind of comments and this bravado that he's had in the media. And then when we get into the pool games, we don't seem to have any idea of actually what the game plan is, and the players don't seem to know what the right decision is decision is to make at certain times. Kicking balls dead, putting the ball on the toe when it should be just put through the hands, just not really putting the opposition under a whole lot of pressure or putting our stamp on the game.
What it speaks to me now is a test of character, right? So we've come in with a squad that few people expected, with a captain that even fewer expected, that's already changed in 2 games due to injury. And now we're staring at the brink of exiting at the pool stage. That's not a terrifying thing to say. That's the reality we face. If we lose to Wales, we're not making out of the pool. So can this Wallabies team turn it around? Can Eddie Jones and this 33-man squad prove everyone wrong, right? Because there is so much doubt on the world rugby stage and internally that this Wallabies team can do it. Personally, I believe that we can beat Wales. I absolutely think that we can do it. They're not as scary to me as Fiji, and we'll dive through that Portugal game in a tick, but they got just about pants by Portugal in every facet except the scoreboard. So Wales, I don't fear. But what I fear for is this group of Wallabies not living up to the expectations that they set and that we set for them. Like we are a proud rugby nation, but we need to get the results to back up that pride, right? Yep. So we haven't won a final since '99. It's been, 2015 was a charmed run to the final, but 2019 was not a great campaign. We need to prove people wrong, and it becomes the greatest test of character, I think, for a Wallabies team. Maybe even since 2003, since that terrible lead in through the Tri Nations, getting pasted 50 points against us by the All Blacks in Sydney before a home World Cup. That's the kind of pressure I think this team is now under. And I'm so curious. I'm excited as a fan, and I'm desperate to see them do well, because that's now the point we're at. 20 years from probably our biggest test on the world stage, that's what we're facing now. So can we do it? I think we can, but it's so much to overcome for this unit, and how they go, we'll just have to wait and see, and I'll be hanging on every second.
It's almost like we're staring now at Mount Everest.
Yeah.
Just the road out of this pool now has been so complicated. We've made it complicated for ourselves.
I'll tell you what, that bonus point, if Fiji make that kick at the end, if Frank Lamani hits that after full time, we don't make it out of the pool.
No, we're out.
We genuinely don't make it out of the pool. So we've been given a lifeline. Bloody hell, we've got to take it. We need to take it, because it's mathematically possible. If we beat Wales, we've got the 1v1 against them, and it becomes a matter of pasting Portugal and doing a number these next 2 weeks. So it's possible, but it's entirely in our hands now.
So from what I understand it, for those at home, the kind of calculations of what happens now, for the World Cup, how this tournament works, if they, at the end of the pool stages, if teams are tied for points, there's not a clear first and second in the pool, it doesn't come down to for and against. It comes down to whether you won in your pool game. So there is a real chance that at the end of the pool stages, Wales, Australia, and Fiji could all be on the same points. Now, because Wales beat Fiji, they would get in above them. Since Fiji beat us, if we are all tied for the same points, they would get in over us. In that circumstance, we wouldn't make it out of the pool. Now, what we need and we're relying on is to ensure we get out of the pool as successfully as possible next week. We need to beat Wales with a bonus point and deny them a losing bonus point. That gets us out regardless.
Yep.
If we don't do that, if we get a losing bonus point, I don't think it's enough. I think we're out completely.
No, we've got to win.
We need to win.
A minimum is a win.
Yeah. So we need to win, and then there's still a chance. We need to then, I think we need to beat Portugal without letting them get a bonus point against us. We need to win with a bonus point there, which, is going to be a big challenge for this Wallabies team, I think, at the moment. But let's try and wrap it up. There is a lot more rugby to chat through. Is there any final thoughts you want, or any final comments you wanted to say about this game?
Yep, buy yourself a Georgian jersey, because we are backing Georgia for the next 2 weeks like you would not believe, especially against the Welsh, because really no one wants to see Wales go through. I want to see Fiji make the quarters. I just don't want it at our expense. So get behind the Lelos these next 2 weeks, especially against Wales. But let's crack on to these next games, hey?
All right, so Pool A is my pool, so I'll run through these quickly. So we had the top teams against the minnows this week. So France, Uruguay, 27-12 was the final score there. Now, leading into this game, I think a lot of people were expecting France to be dominant, to come away with a win. I don't think we expected Uruguay to come as close as they did. Now, Uruguay played a really great style of rugby. They were fantastic to watch. I think there's a lot of people out there who maybe are neutrals in just rugby in general, don't have a team to back. Uruguay is quickly becoming everyone's second team because they were fantastic to watch. The passion that they played with, the amount of pressure that they put France under was awesome to see. And they made France work for this victory all the way to the end.
100%. They really exposed the lack of depth at 9, I thought. Not having Dupont on steering things around. Maxime Lucu doesn't hold a candle to Antoine Dupont. And I know Dupont's a fantastic player, but they looked quite rudderless without their, petit general. So all I can say is, if Lucu's on, absolutely sack him. But yeah, backing Los Terros 100% of the way. They were brilliant.
The second game for Pool A was New Zealand against Namibia. Now, this was always going to be a cricket score. Final score was 71-3 to New Zealand. I got to admit, I was actually expecting New Zealand to get a fair bit more, or score a few more points in this game. I was thinking maybe 90 or 100 against Namibia. There was a bit of a big downpour of rain about 10 minutes into the first half, which I think in some ways slowed New Zealand down a little bit, stopped them scoring as many points or as many tries. But the team that New Zealand picked this week was a pretty big team, considering that they were coming up against Namibia. We had Damien McKenzie came into 10. We had Cam Roygaard at 9, and he scored 2 tries. And he's starting to sort of really put a lot of pressure on Aaron Smith, I think, to be that player later in the tournament when they get to the sort of do or die stages, to see which way Ian Foster goes there. But we all kind of expected this result. Namibia, they did well to get 3 points, I think. Didn't really put New Zealand under a whole lot of pressure. Unfortunate for Richard Hardwick, because we know what a good player he can be when he plays for a team like the Rebels. But it's a pretty hard watch when you come up against one of the best teams in the world, 71-3. A question for you before we move out off this stage, and something that I've seen mentioned on social media this week. Do you see, or the question was, is there value in having games like this? A minnow team up against one of the top teams in the world, 71-3. And the person that asked this was sort of saying, surely this doesn't actually do anything to favor that tier 2 nation who's coming up against a powerhouse and isn't actually going to realistically stand a chance. Conceding 60 or 70 points is not a good look. What is your thought on that?
I totally disagree. And the evidence is directly above it on our score sheet. No one's expecting, I think, Uruguay to come within 15 points of France and deny them a bonus point. So sure, like there'll be a blowout every now and then, but we've already seen, Romania score the first try against Ireland and the roar of the crowd. Chile doing the same thing against Japan.
Well, Uruguay scored the first this week against France.
Exactly. So it's all part of the rugby narrative and what rugby has over, sports like, a main competitive rugby league is that there are teams from everywhere that can compete. I mean, you're not really going to see something like that in that 13-man code, and the World Cup over there is a bit of a bloody joke. But this is the occasion where, teams like Los Terros can step up and have a crack at the host nation and deny them a bonus point, which is huge in this pool coming through. It could lead to something really interesting happening with that top seeding if Italy can give France a good shake. But yeah, I think you need to keep these games. And credit to Namibia. They've played against the All Blacks in the past 3 consecutive World Cups. And I saw a really cool thing out of Namibian media with the captain, Johan Dazel, swapping jerseys with Anton Leonard-Brown, which they've done at a past World Cup as well, which I thought was a really cool note. But yeah, interesting ones out of Pool A this weekend.
Well, let's look at how things are sitting on the table after week 2 of the World Cup. So we have France in top spot on 8 points, followed closely by New Zealand on 5 points. We then have Italy in third place, also on 5 points. We then have Uruguay and Namibia following behind, both yet to get a win in this tournament. Yeah, I think that's kind of it for Pool A at the moment. Lots more rugby to be played in the coming weeks. Let's dive across into Pool B now, which is your pool. Is that correct?
Yeah, the World Pool. We're back into it. First one of this weekend was Ireland v Tonga, and a lot of hype coming in from the Tongan side because it was their first game of the tournament. And that's how it kind of looked as well. The first 20 minutes were really tight in this game. Obviously ended up 59 points to 16, Ireland banking the bonus point win. Maybe a bigger margin that some expected, certainly a larger margin than I expected. But that first 20 minutes, Tonga weren't cracking at all. It took a really nice interplay between Johnny Sexton using their attack back in towards the ruck, sort of dragging the defenders away and then peeling back in past the pillar defender. It was a really nice try for Ty Burn to open that up. And from there, there was a bit of a turning point 26 minutes in when the wheels started turning. There was a really soft penalty given away from Solomon Carter, James Lowe milking a bit of a late shot, and it immediately turned into a penalty, rolling ball try, and then bang, the game just sort of getting away from Tonga. Mac Hansen scored a brilliant try, stepped inside about 4 players and scored all himself, just reminding us what we're missing out on. But highlight of the night, regardless of the score blowing out, Charles Piutau did the filthiest, most decadent sidestep I've ever seen. Left Irish fullback Hugo Keenan for dead on counter-attack, just broke both ankles, left him kneeling on the floor. It was beautiful. And like seeing Charles Piutau at the top stage, I know he carves up for Bristol and, he's a staple of European rugby, but we don't know what we're missing with this guy. He truly could have been 100 cap All Black if he'd stuck around and nailed down that spot for the better part of a decade. So I'm quite glad he didn't. But there you go. It ended up blowing out Ireland, banking the bonus point win. Bundy Aki again, incredible at 12. If he's in your fantasy team, well done. And Conor Murray and Ty Burn, really impressive as well. Plus Willie Havili for Tonga. You might have seen him running around for Moana or for Tasman if you watch the NPC. He's been really good, both off the tee and around the park as a playmaker. So that was great. And then across to South Africa, Romania, which was a bit of a procession, if we're honest. The Springboks rolled them 76 points to 0. What can I say? The Boks had a bonus point after 12 minutes.
Yep.
Hat tricks to Makazole and Pipi and Kobus Reinach. Really, it was a total mismatch. This is probably the only game where I thought about your question before, and maybe, is it tough seeing these minnows play? But, Romania had a couple of good cracks. They just missed out on half-time, a rolling maul try, sort of just went astray and they lost possession near the line. But, yeah, if you're after sidesteps, go watch the highlights from this one. Damien Willems, murdered a stack of Romanians on the field. Grant Williams and Makazole and Pipi, Willie LaRue, they all stepped their way through a pretty weak defensive line. And all I can say about it was that it was a lesson in clinical rugby. You know, you're playing tournament footy, you're against a tier 2 nation, bang, 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 there's your bonus point, roll on the subs and pile on the pain. So credit to South Africa and well done, Romania. It doesn't get much easier with Scotland and Tonga, but we are backing you in Pool B. And that takes us back over to Pool C, Mitch.
Well, so the final standings after 2 weeks of the World Cup is for Pool B. We've got Ireland in first place on 10 points, South Africa in second place on 9 points, Scotland yet to get any points so far. They haven't won a game. Same with Tonga and Romania. So big weekend coming up this coming weekend. I think it's the Ireland versus South Africa game, which everyone is very much looking forward to. Just wanted to say briefly on South Africa. So we put that game on would have been Sunday night, and we watched the first maybe 10 minutes, and it was already 4 tries down by that point. It was like, okay, this is, I don't think we need to see much more. South Africa just looked absolutely dominant. But they had in their 23 4 scrum halves. Now, when South Africa named their World Cup squad, they had 4 scrum halves listed, and everyone's going, what's doing here, guys? You don't need 4. And then they roll them all out in their first game against Romania. What's going on there?
It was great, and Faf, as we kind of predicted in that last in our wind up earlier last week, you know, Faf de Klerk came in off the bench as a reserve fly half, and did really well. Kicked off the tee, had a couple of try assists actually from 10, which is terrifying. And then Grant Williams, if you've seen him in URC for the Sharks, he is electric and scored a couple of brilliant tries for them and showed his pace again on the wing. So very much in that, you know, Francois Holgard mode of having a versatile winger halfback. But look, the Boks aren't doing too much wrong with their campaign. If we were in their shoes, I'm sure we'd be very happy having 4 Tate McDermotts running around for us.
Yeah, well, that's right. And Ireland as well, at this point in the competition, won both of their games with a bonus point. So they're going to be tested this week against South Africa, and it's going to be really exciting. I'm really looking forward to that. But we will do our preview later in the week when we get to the wrap-up, or the wind-up, sorry. Pool C, which is the Wallabies pool. So we mentioned it already, 15-22 to Fiji there. But the other game of the round was Wales and Portugal. Now, as Lachie did sort of mention in our review of the Australia game, the final score was 28-8 to Wales, but it didn't really reflect... The score doesn't really reflect how much of a fight Portugal put up or how easy it might have seemed Wales did this one.
I have nothing but contempt for Wales at this World Cup, I've got to be honest. They didn't deserve to beat Fiji. They didn't deserve to beat Portugal, and I hope we absolutely pants them this weekend because they needed 82 minutes to put a bonus point on Portugal. Realistically, I've seen nothing in attack that really scares me. Portugal left 8 points out there as well from kicks, so it could have been a lot closer, but I thought their fullback, Suzu Gedge, I think, was brilliant. He had a couple of great carving lines. You know, the Welsh didn't do themselves any favours. Johnny Williams got yellow carded their centre, and he had a bit of a mare as well. There's nothing out of that Welsh performance scared me. In fact, the whole highlight was the Portuguese try, which is a really exciting interplay off the top of the line out back towards the flanker coming through. I think it was Nicholas Mata ended up scoring the try, and the place just erupted. So super stoked for Portugal to go through.
Is that the one where they throw it off the top and then go to the guy coming through?
Yeah, it was brilliant. It was a great little interplay. So really, really happy for them. You know, a couple of, you know, sort of pluggers tries for Wales. Dewey Lake, their co-captain, burrowed over. There was a pretty good, you know, chip and chasey grubber try from Lewis Rees-Zammit, who's quickly becoming my least favourite player for being a total tool. And then, Falatau gets a try off the scrum in overtime to steal a bonus point. So I don't think Wales deserved a bonus point. Portugal, I'm really excited to watch and almost a little worried to see how we go and if we can get a bonus point against them, given our record over the past 2 weeks. But yeah, no fear from Wales out of that game.
which we may need, as we said before. So the standings currently for Pool C after 2 weeks of play, we've got Wales on 10 points with 2 bonus points. We've got Fiji in second place on 6 points. They've also got 2 bonus points, 1 losing bonus point against Wales in week 1. Australia is also on 6 points, but because Fiji did beat us, they're ahead of us on the table. We have 2 bonus points as well. And then we have Georgia and Portugal following up the table, currently yet to get a win. Now, what I'm hopeful for moving forward in for Pool C and a team that we can all get behind, Georgia. I think Georgia they've had the week off this week, so they're going to come into this next few weeks really firing. It's going to be a real test to see if Fiji can back up against Portugal after their win against Australia this week. I think they play Fiji next week. That's correct? Yeah. So, I mean, I'm not holding my breath, but how good would it be to see Georgia push Fiji all the way and potentially cause an upset? If it was to happen, I think Georgia, they've done it in the past, and let's see if they can pull another miracle out of the hat. But if they could take a win off Wales, that would be so good from an Aussie perspective.
Oh, exactly. And we saw them go to Cardiff and beat them at Millennium Stadium not long ago. So I'm putting a lot of very hopeful eggs in that basket. I don't necessarily want to see Fiji knocked out of contention. I think I'm firmly pitted against the Welsh. Sorry to any Welsh listeners out there. Squidge, how you going? But yeah, we'll be back in the Lilos in that game. And then if Portugal can, pull out some tricks, maybe keep a bonus point off Fiji, things like that. Anything they can do to help. It's now becoming a team effort to get the Wallabies into the quarterfinals.
Well, let's go to Pool D. Now, Ando isn't here this week, so we'll do the Pool D coverage on his behalf. Now, we had Samoa getting their first taste of World Cup in 2023. They had a victory over Chile, 43-10. And the second game of the week, we had England up against Japan, and England got the chocolates there, 34-12. Touching on that first game, Samoa versus Chile, what did you think of Samoa's performance?
It was pretty good. It was a slow start, I've got to be honest. They really didn't assert themselves until that second half. So Chile got out to a lead again. They scored first. Rodrigo Fernandez, a great fun name to say, set up a great try for Ditas. And then there was a brain fart afterwards from Adelaide product, actually, Usage Sitini, who got sent off with a yellow card. But I was down to Christian Liliafano keeping them ticking over at the start. He kicked 4 from 4 and then 5 from 5 in the first half, 4 penalties in a row. And then Duncan Paiawa scoring, just on the stroke of half time, a nice long range try, really put them into prominent position. So from the 42nd minute, through to the 51st, there was, 1, 2, 3 punch, try after try after try, and the game got away from Chile. So a bit of a late slow start than Samoa would like. But yeah, plenty to like about Manu Samoa. A couple of highlights from the Chilean side. Domingo Saavedra ironed out Liliafano in one of the best tackles of the tournament so far. If you go through, watch the mini, keep an eye out for that. It's spectacular hit, textbook stuff. And then, what's his name? Esteban Inostroza, who was the reserve tight head for Los Condors, has the worst haircut in Rugby World Cup history, the sort of top-knot mullet combination with a bit of a beard, and also had the shortest time on field. He got yellow carded after about a minute. So a couple of little highlights there. Anything stand out to you from this game, Mitch?
Oh, it was just as an Aussie, and particularly watching the Wallabies performance against Fiji, it was kind of hoping to have the performances of Christian Liliafano or Duncan Paiawa playing for the boys in gold. And if we had their performance against Chile, against Fiji, we might have come a little bit closer than what we actually ended up seeing. So what could have been
a measured veteran fly half to call upon,
exactly.
like Liliafano in a different world, maybe.
That's right. But no, stoked for Samoa. I think their slow start is probably just typified by their first week off in this competition. There's a lot of new faces in this Samoan team. We've got players coming in from Australia, from New Zealand, some guys coming in that haven't really been in the setup for a while for Samoa and getting their opportunity at the World Cup. for their home nation. Pretty emotional. You could tell from the anthems that some of these players getting to play for their mother country for the first time, particularly if they have caps for New Zealand or Australia, you could definitely tell that it meant something to them to be able to play for Samoa in this World Cup. So I'm expecting them to be better in coming weeks and to sort of build into this tournament. But, 43-10 is not a bad score by any means. So I think they'll be pretty happy with that.
Absolutely. And then looking over at the next game with England-Japan, I don't think you can find a more contrasting style. Samoa, building nicely through the first half and then great attacking rugby. And England, once again, undeserving of a bonus point try and just boring me to tears. It was an awful game from the English in these gross, greasy conditions that suited them and their greasy Pom fans. And
at least they scored a try, right? They didn't just kick all their points this week.
They scored 4, and all of them were rubbish. Let me go through these tries. You'll write them down. I was really upset by them all. First one comes off the back of a Japanese line-out error 5 meters out, gets picked up, crashed over. Nothing on them. The game breaks open when Joe Marler gets falconed by a pass, bounces off his head, everyone stops playing, and Courtney Laws picks it up with his, size 84 hands and dots it down under the post. So that's rubbish. Then we had Ford, willingly just kicking it to Freddie Stewart, who just squeezes it in touch. So, one-on-one kick. I don't think that's creative rugby. And then finally, after full time, there's a decent constructed try and Joe Marchant goes over. But the first two were just awful. The score flattered England. Only decent players, I thought, from the Poms. George Ford again, he's doing exactly what he's told. He's sitting back in the pocket. He's kicking it to the outhouse. And the back row is doing all the work cleaning up. So Courtney Laws has been great. Ben Earl's a good find. Plays sort of 6 and 8 from what I can see, and a bit of 7. But the Japanese, I felt for them because they play really good, expansive rugby. It just wasn't suited to the conditions. They dropped a lot of pill, and they could have had it. It was the score was 13-12 after 50 minutes before England sort of had their little Marler header breakthrough and ended up running away with it. In a different world, this is the miracle of Brighton all over again.
It's a trend that's starting to happen in this World Cup of play the whistle. Now, we saw that in the opening game against France and New Zealand, that when there was a lot of that pass from Rieko Ioane, which was it forward, was it not, whatever it was, all the French players stopped and sort of started going like, the forward pass, what are you doing? And Rieko goes in, Jordan goes in and scores the try. You got to play the whistle. Keep playing. Even if you think it's a knock-on, even if you think it's a forward pass, you got to keep playing. This is a World Cup. You can't be fooled by things like that. Let's look at the... Sorry, did you have anything else around that game?
I was just going to say there was one really great play from the Japanese that I'd love to highlight. So even in greasy conditions, it was gross, it was hot, it was slippery, ball was like a cake of soap. But the Japanese still went length of the field on the brilliant counter-attack. Kotaro Matsushima, hero of the 2019 World Cup, carved through, and then Aussie expat Dylan Riley linked up as well. They went about 80 meters and just coughed up the ball, and that was only a couple of minutes after Marler's header. So if they cross there, maybe we're looking at a different score. But Japan now facing a pretty tough ask to get out of their pool. They've still got games against Argentina and Samoa to come. And you'd have to think that, England are almost home and hose now out of this pool. So very interested to see how the ladder in front of us plays out.
Yeah, so looking at the ladder, we've got England in first place on 9 points. They've got 1 bonus point so far, but 2 wins. Samoa in second place with 1 bonus point, 1 win on 5 points. Japan also on 5 points, 1 win and 1 bonus point. We then have Argentina currently on 0 points. They've only played 1 game. They did have the bye this week. And then Chile coming up the rear, 2 games played, no bonus points. So interesting to see how Argentina can bounce back after their opening game against England. Not the style of play that they would have wanted to bring, not the opening to this World Cup they would have wanted. a lot of people were expecting Argentina to come in and blow England away and to get a pretty dominant win there. They didn't do that, and England came away with the victory there. In some ways, I think it's probably a good thing that they got this break now so that they can really regather, regroup, focus on a few different things, and just launch into the rest of this tournament and see if they can give it a red-hot crack. Anything else you wanted to say around any of the games from this week, or should we move on into the final bit of our podcast?
I think that's pretty comprehensive. Let's rip into the wider World Cup chat.
All right, let's go. All right, so we've done our review of week 2 of the Rugby World Cup 2023, and I wanted to take an opportunity to look forward to the future. Now, there has been some news that's come out in the past week or so around Rugby World Cup 27 that's being played in Australia. Now, it's been talked about where the final is going to be played for World Cup 27 in Australia, whether it's in Melbourne, whether it's in Sydney, whether it's in, most likely it won't be in Brisbane, whether it's in Perth. Now, it was expected that that final was going to be announced by the end of this year's tournament. So in the next few weeks, they were going to announce it. World Rugby has come out and said that they've actually put off announcing where that final is going to be played until sometime next year, because they're starting to review the format of World Cup 27 and 29 moving forward. Maybe not so much 29 at this stage, but they're wondering whether they expand the competition to include 4 extra teams. So currently in 2023, and what we've had up until this point, we've got 4 pools with 4 pools, with 5 teams in each. What World Rugby is suggesting is increasing the number to 24 teams by 2027. Lachie, I wanted to get your thoughts on this. What do you think of the idea of it including more teams in the World Cup? And how do you think would be the best way to do that?
I mean, first look at it is I like it. I think the more teams that play in it, the more we can grow and expand our audience across the world, the more product we have to offer as the host nation. That's more games that we can put on, more venues that can host, a great opportunity for people to access that. And also it's commercially. I think obviously you're looking at 20 extra games if you add in a 6th team to each pool. With the 5 games in each, it's something like 20 extra games. So that's massive with regards to new employees, opportunities created by this. So my first instinct is that's really exciting. But then I looked and thought, do we have the depth? We flagged this earlier in the pod about the South Africa-Romania game being a bit of a cricket score, New Zealand, Namibia. So do we have the depth around the world? And I was looking at some of the teams that didn't make the World Cup this year, and we've got teams like the United States and Canada who are consistent World Cup players that missed out. And I thought, wow, maybe we do. But outside of those 2 countries, could you find me another 2 that are up to scratch? Really? I mean, maybe Spain, maybe Brazil. I think Hong Kong was in a repechage against Tonga or towards the end of things.
We might have played a previous World Cup at some point. And
the Ivory Coast played in
bigger than Namibia.
Yeah, so there's potential there, but I think we would need to ensure that maybe there's a blowout score, but it can't be worse. I think it would be really bad for the game if we saw like a New Zealand Japan in 95, 145 points racked up, or Australia Namibia in 03, 142. Like that's not good for the game. But I think bringing in extra teams and the commercial opportunities out of that, that's super exciting to me. Have you got any initial thoughts on it?
Well, I would love the idea of bringing in more teams. I think when you look at previous World Cups and what a team like Canada or America have done and have brought to those World Cups, it's pretty amazing to think that they didn't even qualify for this one, considering that America's hosting the World Cup in 2032. Like they're the next host after Australia, and yet they didn't even qualify. My question is, how do we do it though? I don't know if just adding an extra team into the bottom of every pool is necessarily going to add as much value as we think it will. As we said, we then get that mismatch of New Zealand against Canada or New Zealand against the Ivory Coast. And we're already seeing with teams like Romania and Namibia that they're getting big scores put against them. I wonder if having more teams opens up the avenue of going down different pathways of having potentially, and I've seen some people talk on social media around almost having two competitions similar to like a sevens tournament, that you have like the World Cup and then you have like the World Rugby Plate or Shield or whatever you want to call it, where you play the tournament as it is, but then the teams that make the quarterfinals or the whatever would be the quarterfinals and the semifinals go off. So Australia, New Zealand, South Africa, all those teams go off their one way, but then the other teams go a separate way. And then you almost have like a tier 2 nation tournament on the other side. Maybe that's something for Australia to achieve, to strive towards winning the tier 2 nation in coming years.
It'd be really interesting. I think commercially as well, having a separate final series would be super cool. Like putting on your money hat and saying, how can Australian rugby make the most bang for their buck out of this? It'd be great. But there needs to be buy-in from teams. And I think you run the risk of having potentially a tier 1 nation like a Fiji or a Wales, or a worst case scenario, Australia missing out on a quarterfinals, and then playing Portugal, Chile, Canada, and just pumping them on way to a shield. So where's the buy-in there? I think it would need to be managed how that final structure looked, but I think there's no other way to really add the teams in. I think you have to put an extra team into each pool, have your 5 pool games rather than 4, keep your quarterfinal format, and maybe your reward for placing 3rd remains automatic qualification to the next World Cup, and then potentially that 4th and 5th or 5th and 6th ranked teams have an opportunity to play. So maybe you've got top 2 go through, then your cup, and then your plate. It could work with that system, having 6 teams in each pool. But I think these are conversations of people on a far bigger salary sitting somewhere than
I don't hate the idea of having, like, adding an extra team into every pool reduces the need for a bye week. So I don't recall in the past ever having bye weeks before this World Cup. I don't remember the Wallabies having a week off in like week 2 or 3 of previous World Cups. And I know that we've introduced it in this World Cup because in the past, it ended up falling on some of the lower ranked teams like Samoa or Tonga or Georgia to be backing up and playing those Tuesday, Wednesday games and then having like a 4 or 5 day turnaround, which is a pretty hard thing to be going up against in a World Cup. So I don't necessarily hate the idea of having an extra team slotted in so that we don't have to have that and that we can just have more games rolling through the week. And then potentially that opens up the avenue of having more games throughout a week. At the moment, we kind of have a game in Australia, particularly. We have the games that start on sort of Thursday night or early Friday morning, and then the last game's on Monday. But then you've got a few days off. And so it kind of feels like there's a gap where it would be cool.
No days off. I want a game every day in the World Cup. So I think I'm all for more players and more teams getting involved. And what a great way to showcase that if it's, at a home World Cup for Australia, to be able to do that with an expanded World Cup, not just for the men's in 27, but if it's possible to do it for our women's World Cup in 2029, I would love to see some of those nations that are coming up through WXV 2 and 3, not us because we're WXV1, but some of these other ranked teams to come through and play in Australia at an expanded World Cup. I think that'd be brilliant to see, 20 teams, competing at a women's World Cup as opposed to, I think we had 12 over in New Zealand. I think that'd be a massive stamp on the game, and it ties in quite nicely actually to where we're heading next.
I was just going to say before we finish up on this, putting our Aussie hats on and thinking a bit more of ourselves for a minute, how good would it be for, as Australian rugby fans based in Australia for 2027, for there to be games all throughout the week, that for the entirety of the tournament, we could just be traveling around Australia and going to games every single day for a month and a half. How good would that
That
be?
that is a dream. That is literally the dream. If I can waltz down after a couple of beers to the train and catch it down to Suncorp, watch Australia pump the minnows, New Zealand in a pool game, head on home. Yeah, it'd be lovely to see it all happen. But yeah, and being able to showcase the game in places like, take a World Cup up to Darwin, take a World Cup game down to Hobart. Let's see if we can play at some of these bigger places like in Newcastle, or leverage some of the smaller boutique stadiums around the country. I just think there's so much opportunity. And if Australia can be the country that champions that through the next World Cups in 27 and 29, I'm fully on board.
Fantastic. Well, let's finish things off with the Wallaroos, and they have announced their squad for the Laura O'Reilly Cup and then the World's 15-1. I think that's how you say it, or Tier 1. That's coming up later this year. So for those that are on YouTube, you can see the team up in front of us. The first thing I wanted to say, purely just from a graphical perspective, how good have the Wallaroos done here? And it is similar graphic to what the Wallabies did earlier in this year and put out. But I haven't seen a physical sticker book yet like this. And I'm calling out to RA. They need to make one because I will be spending my hard-earned cash on this. It looks fantastic.
It looks so good, and props to the graphics team. I think that's Oscar, mate. Shout out to you. But it looks sensational, and I want to see them in on back of kids textbooks at school, exercise books. Chuck them in a Weet-Bix box. Wherever we can get this design, because it looks great. It showcases.
Or maybe inside a Cadbury's Favourites. That's probably where
Cadbury's Favourites. Yeah, that'd be good. That'd be really good, actually. But the more that we can share this stuff around, the better, because it looks great. The girls are going to be brilliant over for O'Reilly Cup. It's a massive challenge, obviously, taking on the Black Ferns, especially given, we got a bit of a touch-up last time in Redcliffe, but a super exciting opportunity. And a couple of changes I'll quickly flag before we wrap up. I know we've been going for a while, but we've got 4 uncapped players in the squad. Mel Wilkes, who's Bond Uni Queensland player, who's been carving up along here. She was one of the best on ground in the recent QPR final with a Bond 1. You've also got Desiree Miller, who's been retained in this squad, even though she hasn't debuted yet. Huge season with the Tars, as you've flagged in the past. Plus front row Brianna Hoy and second row Leilani Nathan, all Tars that have been included too. So some big ins there. A big out is still Piper Duck. The ankle injury has persisted, gone under the knife. But I thought Michaela Leonard's been able to do a pretty good job stepping up. Since Piper's taken over, and obviously without Shannon Parry in the mix anymore. Big Mac Leonard's running the cutter there in the second row, and some really exciting games coming up, because as it says up on the tin, this isn't just a squad for O'Reilly Cup. This is for WXV. 3 massive games against England, France, and Wales, and this is outside of a World Cup, and for many of these players, this will be the biggest, 2 months in their playing career.
Yep. Now, there's one question I had for you, and we've seen it in the Wallabies earlier this year, this utility position. It's now moved across into the Wallaroos. So we have Sio Kapesi-Palu from the Brumbies, who's been announced as a utility player. Now, what does that mean for those that aren't as across women's rugby? Where do we expect her to be playing for the Wallaroos?
That's an interesting one. I haven't tweaked that before. Pessy usually plays in the centres, from what I've seen. And if memory serves me correct, she was playing 13 or 12 for the Brumbies throughout this year and playing really well. Perhaps that lends itself as a backline utility. I don't know if Pessy's ever played in the pack. I'd have to go back and do my homework. I certainly don't think it's a Josh Kemeny situation or a Ben Donaldson where you pretty much know where they're going. But yeah, I'm interested. I'll have to check that one out.
I wonder if that is Jay Tregoning's idea, or whether Eddie Jones, as his so-called advisor of women's rugby, when he came into the thing, said, you need to name a utility too, because that's what we do in Australian rugby now. We just have utilities, positionless rugby. That's where we're at.
15 aside, and you just let them run free. Hopefully, we see a bit more strategy in this one.
Let's hope so. Well, let's finish things off there. Very much looking forward to seeing the Wallaroos grace our screens again. It's been a few weeks since we've seen them pull on the gold jersey. So I'm very much looking forward to seeing if they can get up against New Zealand and get their first ever victory against the Black Ferns, which is going to be a massive task for them, but very much behind them all the way. Thanks for getting to this point of the podcast. We will be back in your feeds later this week when we do our previews for week 3 in the wind-up for some big games coming up this weekend of Rugby World Cup action.
Huge games. Whoa.
Very much looking forward to previewing those and seeing how we go, whether we go with our heads or with our hearts this week, Lachie. Have a think now before we get to the preview later in the weeks.
No thought. I'm going with my heart. I'm backing the bloody Wallabies, and so should you.
All right. Thanks, everyone. We'll be back next week. I'll see you then. Bye.
Bye.